And it was a good job I did, because it happened to two other police officers who were in a large group of Manchester United hooligans, who walked them into an estate in Manchester. One of them had been recognised as a police officer for whatever reason, and they walked them into an estate and given them a good kicking, a good hiding, and they ended up going to hospital.
So, Psych for Sore Mind viewers, I've got a very special guest on with me today, Garry Rogers, who used to be a policeman and has a fascinating backstory. Welcome to you, Garry.
Thanks very much for having me on, Sean.
Absolute pleasure, mate. So I'm going to jump in there straight away and ask you, if you don't mind explaining to my viewers, what led up to you starting to do undercover work?
I think the main thing that gripped my interest in it was for a period of 5-6 years. I was on the regional crime squad. Now the regional crime squad at that time were mainly engaged in surveillance, covert surveillance. So that would mean we would obviously follow individuals who were suspected of committing particular crime, and you'd follow them all day covertly. Hopefully you would glean enough evidence then to arrest them, either for conspiracy to commit offences, or, as we did on many occasions, actually saw them committing crime. But one of the sergeants in the office at the time, who I'll refer to as H, was an undercover officer. So I used to observe the work he did, and that gripped my attention into that particular sphere of policing, which not many people go into, basically.
I imagine that must have been quite frustrating, Garry, because correct me if I'm wrong, but these are all assumptions. There must have been loads of time of just sort of waiting around and watching. Was it like that? Was there a lot of wait? Was there a lot
on the surveillance side?
Yeah,
because obviously you get information about where they would be on a particular evening. You'd be turned out early the next morning, and you'd plot up on that particular area, and hopefully you would then catch them as they left wherever they were going from to go out and commit crime. And that is the most dangerous time then, when you pick them up from the home address or somebody's address, because as soon as they leave there, they're automatically looking to see if anyone's following them.
Okay. And just
once you get them away, so once you get them away from that area, they settle down then, and then they don't start looking as much.
And just to give us a bit of context, please, Garry, do you mind telling us, you don't have to name any names if you don't want to, but what kind of criminals are we talking about? Like drug dealers, thugs, and what kind of things?
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about not people who commit low crime, not going pinching bottles of milk off steps. They're out committing robberies or drugs dealing. So it's all major crime, and that's why those who do that work as police officers have to be highly trained in surveillance, because there's no point doing it if you stand out. Yeah,
fair enough. And then what made, so you've explained what got you interested in doing undercover work. Then do you mind telling us about what actually happened next, how you got into it, and what your first kind of jobs were?
So I obviously left the regional crime squad and went back to a division in Greater Manchester Police. So for 6 years, I've been seconded away from Greater Manchester Police, working all over the country. And then I came back to Greater Manchester Police. I mean, in a short period of time, I bumped into H, who I mentioned before, who was obviously heavily involved in a particular job, which he didn't talk about, but I knew something was going on. And as a result of me inquiring a little bit further, I realised then that Greater Manchester Police had set up, because of the football hooliganism problem in the country, a dedicated undercover unit, which was called 𝐏𝐬𝐲𝐜𝐡 in Greater Manchester Police, and he was heading that department.
Okay, and so you were interested, and you asked to be part of it, right?
Well, obviously, I had bumped into him again a few weeks later, and the result, I was placed on a deep infiltration course, which is a prerequisite to becoming an undercover officer. So you have to go on the course, which is a deep infiltration course, and then if you pass that, you then can become an undercover officer.
And how are you feeling about all this at the time? I would be shit scared to have to go into that kind of environment.
I think being a younger guy at the time, and I was never the sort of police officer who could stay in one place at one time for a length of time. There's some police officers who join the police, they stay on the same division for 30 years.
Yeah.
I'm not calling those. That's great if that's what they want to do. But I was always of a mind that I wanted to move around a bit.
Yeah.
And obviously, you're getting more experience everywhere you go. So to have the 6 years under my belt as a regional crime squad officer, doing the covert surveillance and working on some of H's undercover jobs, I had a certain grounding for that sort of thing.
Okay.
And I was just excited because it's. I think I said on previously to somebody else on with Sean, it becomes like a drug, that job, because you get a high every time you get an achievement from it.
Yeah. So
you
get
know,
kind of addicted to the adrenaline.
That's right, and you get fix from it, and the more success you have, the bigger the fix is, and you want to move on to the next job, and you take what you've gleaned from the job prior to that one on the next one. So you're always improving, if you see what I'm saying.
So how did you go about actually infiltrating a hooligan group? What's the process?
So the first opportunity I had, because when I first started in Amiga, I should have been doing the Manchester United hooliganism problem. I was going in there as an undercover officer when I first joined.
Yeah.
But when I checked the intelligence, there was somebody that I saw in the intelligence package who knew me from school.
Right. Okay.
So what's the chances? It's a small world. If I'd have gone doing that, that I didn't bump into them.
Yeah.
And I'm saying I'm Joe Bloggs when really I'm Garry Rogers, police officer. So I had to be honest and declare that. And it was a good job I did, because it happened to two other police officers who were in a large group of Manchester United hooligans who walked them into an estate in Manchester. One of them had been recognised as a police officer for whatever reason, and they walked them into an estate and given them a good kicking, a good hiding, and they ended up going to hospital.
Wow.
Now, had I have not declared it and been upfront, I could have been in that situation.
Okay.
So my first opportunity then was, by chance, Great Manchester Police got the contract to do the Italia 90 in Italy.
Yeah.
So I went to Sardinia as a hooligan. And obviously, we had 3 matches on the island of Sardinia. This was the England fans' big opportunity to prove themselves, because Margaret Thatcher didn't want England to take part in that competition because of all the trouble at 𝐏𝐬𝐲𝐝 Stadium and the people who'd been killed as a result of these riots.
Okay.
It was the last chance for England fans to to show they could be okay. So they housed them initially on Sardinia for the first 3 games. And as a hooligan there, I was living and breathing with them every day.
And did they ask much about your sort of background? Did they try and sort of test the CV for real?
The big difference is if I was I am a Manchester United fan, but if we'd have been playing Chelsea at weekend in Manchester, there'd have been the 2 hooligan elements coming together somewhere and having a fisticuff somewhere.
Yeah.
Now, when you go to England, all those things are put on a back burner because you're now an England hooligan team. So it doesn't matter who you follow back home, you're all one for that competition.
Yeah.
So when we were in Italy, you could travel around quite freely there, and it didn't matter whether you supported Chelsea, Arsenal, Manchester United or City. Everybody got on because we're there as an England contingent.
So it sounds like they weren't testing you so much to see if you were genuine or not, because they just assumed.
Yeah, well, yeah, and then obviously they spend most of the day in the bars, both on and off match days. But in between the matches, every day would be spent in a bar, and they'd be drinking all day, all night, and you were just part of that social scene. But you couldn't obviously be drinking like them because you wouldn't remember anything. And your evidence won't be relied on. So you had to make a conscious effort that you wouldn't be drinking, although you make it appear to them that you are, because you could walk from one group to another, put the pint down and pick up an empty glass and come back as if you've drunk it.
Yeah, okay.
And no one's any the wiser. But you pick it up whilst you're in those groups on the things that they're perhaps planning to do, which you could then feed back to the control room. But, we had an occasion, and I say this, it's not always the case that the England fans are to blame, because I was in 𝐏𝐬𝐲𝐝 in Turkey, and we were in a bar one night, the night before a match, and the England fans were all getting along well together, no problems, drinking in the bar. The next minute, the window went in of the bar, and there was tables and chairs thrown through. And what it was the Turkish fans who'd come for trouble with the English, and they'd thrown the table and chairs through. It was like a bomb had gone off.
Right.
And when we came out, they were all stood outside, and they were actually making threatening gestures like cutting your throat as you came out. The authorities came, police, no question about what's happened. It was just a case of the English are to blame.
Okay.
And we all got arrested and taken to a prison in 𝐿𝐸𝐲𝐻. And I spent the night in a cell there with 40 others, ready to go to court the next morning.
Got a couple of questions about that, please, Garry. So first of all, when you came out and you faced all these Turkish fans, did they care whether not you personally, but everybody was there for a scrap or not? So were they looking for hooligans to fight with, or did they just want to beat up anybody?
They brought the trouble, the fight, if you like, to England's doorstep.
Yeah.
Because that wouldn't have happened had they not come to the bar.
But were they only wanting to fight other hooligans, or were they just wanting to beat up anybody that was associated?
Well, the only people who were there were the football. It wouldn't matter if they don't know if you're a hooligan or not. They just hated the English contingent. So you're the figurehead for them. So they come for a lot of them in there wouldn't have been hooligans, and not all hooligans in that bar.
Yeah.
But there's a lot who are, and everybody gets encased in that. I'm in there. I'm not a hooligan.
Yeah,
I'm purporting to be one, but I get involved in it, and you're guilty by association sometimes.
Of course. And my other question. Sorry. My other question was when you get taken to the prison, are you tempted to kind of say, "Look, I'm an undercover police officer"?
No, because that defeats the whole object. Yeah. And at the end of the day, when you go on the deep infiltration course, you're not at the drop of a hat because something's happened which perhaps makes you fill your pampers and you're in a worrying situation. Yeah. You're not then going saying, "Save me, I'm a police officer," because that job is going to end at that point. So you've got to go with the flow, and what you have is a welfare team who will at some point realise that you've been arrested,
right,
by the name that you've been using. And they will then come and hopefully, as they did on that occasion, when I got took out the next morning, I didn't go to court, although the rest of them thought I was. Yeah. I got diverted off. But when we met up later, they all thought I'd been to court as well, because we all got fined for the damage.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. And when you were having these conversations in the pubs about these kind of activities of getting into scraps and doing all this hooliganism, was it really obvious who the people were that were up for it? I guess what I'm trying to ask was like everybody involved, or was there like a smaller, darker contingency?
When you go like with the England setup, you've got the Chelsea Headhunters. So I would be aware through intelligence. I've probably read up on before we've gone anywhere. That I know who the main ones are in that group.
Right.
But it wouldn't do just to walk straight up to them and go, "Hiya, I'm your new friend. What you're going to plan this time?" Because they'd be looking at you as if you had two heads, and you'd stand out like a sore thumb. So it's all slowly, catch a monkey slowly, and you just ingratiate yourself with certain ones, and you get recognised. And what was great kudos for us was getting arrested in 𝐿𝐸𝐲𝐻, because that is something we could talk about, and they know we were there.
Yeah. Okay. But then you can't be too you can't take it too slowly, can you? Because say in Italia 90, you've only got a limited number of days.
Oh no. And it was a great environment to work in, because it's everyone's relaxed. It's like a holiday setup. The sun was shining, lovely weather. We're all relaxed. And like I said to you before, with villains who move away from the house when they're going committing crime, once they've got away from the house, they settle down and they're getting on with things. All these lot are out in Italy, drinking, sunbathing, just waiting for the next match, and everyone's relaxed. Yeah. So it's a great atmosphere to work in and ingratiate yourself with people you need to ingratiate yourself with.
Okay.
And I was going to say, there was an occasion when I was in Sweden during the Euro Championships. We were in a group there, and there was an ITV news cameraman with the reporter. Yeah. And they attacked him while we were there, and they took the camera off his shoulder, and they were swinging it around, and they smashed it into 1,000 pieces on the floor.
Yeah.
Because obviously they see that as those filming them, and they don't want it.
Okay.
So that camera, which must have been worth a fortune, got smashed up. Now, had we have not been there, they wouldn't have got arrested.
Okay.
But obviously we knew who'd done it. You feed that through and they got arrested.
Okay. Okay, that's really interesting. And were there any hairy moments, Garry, where you thought you were being rumbled, where people were suspicious of you or asking questions that made you think?
Not particularly on the football side. I think when we moved on with that unit and got into the more serious crime and infiltrating that's when those sort of things occur more, because with the football hooligan side, you were working in a group. So I always worked in a group of either 2 or 3 of us, and you're working in a big group of football hooligans and supporters.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're doing a crime thing, I might be meeting you for the first time today, and you're trying to sell something that's illegal to me.
Yeah.
And we're on a one-to-one then, aren't we?
Okay.
So if you see something about me you don't like, that stands out or shouts to you, I'm a police officer, we're not going to go any further.
Okay. So do you mind telling us, Garry, how you got into that? So was that after the football?
Yeah, so obviously with the success of Italia 90, the force GMP realised that this infiltration technique could be used to better effect. So not only could it be used with the football hooligan thing, it could be used in major crime. So they then focused utilising it onto major crime. So I was in the office obviously then, and I was the first one in the office to take on a criminal infiltration. Yeah. And I'm talking about a drugs job. And obviously that sets up totally new problems for you, because you are on your own then. I went to meet the villains in their domain, pretending to be Joe Bloggs, hoping to ingratiate himself with them, and that they then take me on as Joe Bloggs, and we move on and eventually will get arrested. And that's what it's all about. And when you're doing that, and you're moving in there for the first time, that's when, I mentioned changing your Pampers before, that's when you want to do it. Because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And so who makes the initial introduction for you to meet the criminal network?
Well, I've done it both ways. I've done it via an informant, which is whereby somebody who's a villain anyway, who's in trouble for whatever reason, then wants the help from the police at some future trial that they're going to be going to, and to try and get a reduced state sentence. So they then may say, I'm happy to introduce a police officer to such a body who I know is about to commit this crime.
Okay.
And if they're agreeable to that, the undercover officer would meet the informant, and if they got on okay and the story's right, it would progress from there. Okay. No, you would go with the informant and get introduced.
Right.
But the other way I've done it is through intelligence. I've known where villains are going to be. For example, I did a job with a team of Ram Raiders who used a particular gym training every day. Yeah. So I went to that gym, and by the way I acted, i.e. I had a Maserati that I used to go in, and I never spoke to them when I went in, but I got very friendly with the owner, and I would take items in which it would appear was stolen.
Yeah.
And I would sell them in the gym. So straight away, if you're observing that from a distance, I'm not on the straight and level, and that's what I think attracted them to me, because they then, when I got into them, started bringing their the stolen property from ram raids to me. So I became their handler of stolen property.
Wow, that's
and when
really
they delivered it, it was all audio and video recorded. So obviously, when they went to court, they couldn't say it wasn't me, because on one occasion I had them. I had a vehicle which had a camera in the back, and they had the gloves on, and they were putting all this stolen property in the back of my vehicle. Yeah. And you got a full frontal of the face.
Okay. Wow, that was really clever, and also really scary to me, at least. So just out of interest, how long did it take you to ingratiate yourself with them in this gym? Like, are we talking days or weeks or
Well,
months?
yeah, you don't, years ago, undercover jobs were done and dusted in a day or two. But villains become a lot wiser to what the police were doing.
Yeah.
So if I was to meet you today and you're selling, for example, drugs to me, I want to sell drugs, you're going to want to know I really am Joe Bloggs.
Yeah.
So what they want to do these days, they'll want to go to where you live. It's no good saying I live in such a place and my name's Joe Bloggs. You've got to prove it to them. So that's how it progressed, and that's how the system became. And I would then live in the community as Joe Bloggs.
Yeah.
I'd have a covert property. I'd have a car which was registered to Joe Bloggs. And if you were to check me up, because believe it or not, there's a lot of corrupt police officers as well, which I know to my own demise. And, villains have the opportunity sometimes to get police officers to check things up for them.
Okay.
So it's essential. It's essential that as an undercover officer, you are protected. And if anyone was to check you out, it would never come back that you're a policeman.
And when you're living this life, this kind of double life, how much time do you have to dedicate to it? Like, do you get to go home? Do you get to see your family?
It's 24/7, 24/7. On that ram raid job, they did a big motorcycle dealership in Preston just prior to the Easter holidays. And they brought all the leathers, all the motorcycle helmets and boots to my property.
Yeah.
And they wanted paying. But because they did it on the Thursday prior to Good Friday, Great Manchester Police wouldn't pay for police officers to interview them on the bank holidays.
Okay.
So they didn't want them arrested until afterwards. So they asked me to put them off till after the Easter break. So I had to tell them I was going to London because somebody owed me some money.
Yeah.
So they let me have all the stolen property. They delivered it, let me have it. And I said I'd be back within a few days to pay them once I got the money. And because I'd built up this particular trust with them, they let that happen.
Okay.
But bear in mind, when I go home now for that Easter, I couldn't go out anywhere because what if I was seen?
Yeah.
So, you're living it 24/7. Plus, by the way, you look, I was 17 stone with earrings. And when I used to go to my children's school on the odd occasion, I'd have other parents looking at me thinking, who the hell's he?
Wow. So I didn't realize that, Gary. So you actually had like kids at this point when you were doing
yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it affected them. I realize that now. It affected them. It just didn't affect me. It affected my whole family. And
so how long at a time were you away from them? Like several weeks at a time?
Well, it would depend on the job, but I could go to work one morning and my wife wouldn't see me. At one point, I was living in 𝐿𝐲𝐡.
Yeah.
So and sometimes you can't get in contact with home. So they don't know where you are. They don't know what's happening. On one occasion, I got beat up by the police and they broke my cheekbone. So I ended up in hospital.
Wow.
So these
because they thought that you were
they thought on a particular job that because they hadn't been briefed properly that morning in relation to who the undercover officers are. As I ran away, and what should have happened was I left the villains in the unit, which was my wine bar, with these kilos of drugs they'd just delivered. Yeah. And they were waiting for payment. And I gave a signal for a strike to take place, and I should have run off and left them in there. Yeah. And as I ran away, there was a backup team coming to arrest who saw me running and didn't know who I was and just thought it was one of them. Yeah. So they grabbed me, 6 of them. There was a bit of a scuffle went on because I thought they were just trying to make it look good. The more I fought with them, the more I realised they weren't making it look good. It was for real. Yeah. And did you try and explain that to them at the time? Well, there was no, because you don't want to blow the job. Okay. And as I'm fighting with them, these other 2 who were in the unit are being brought out with their arms up the back. Okay, so you had to remain undercover. See me fighting. Yeah. Then they kicked my legs away and my head hit the floor, and that's when I broke my cheekbone. Jesus. Wow. Okay. And then I got arrested with them and taken to the police station. And then did you identify yourself, who you really were at the police station, or you had to wait? I didn't walk up to the charge office sergeant and say, I'm a police officer, by the way. Yeah, of course. Now, I got put in a cell on the cell block, and they were in the cells next to me. and they were shouting to me, don't say anything when you go for interview.
Yeah.
And the welfare team kicks in again then, because that incident was being filmed from an observation point.
Yeah.
So they saw me getting attacked by the police. They saw me get uprooted and then put in the back of a police car. So they go to the police station, and that's when they sort it out, but discreetly.
Okay. Okay. Wow. And I have to ask this, being a psychiatrist, what kind of impact does this have on your mental health? Because to me, it sounds like a nightmare. You're separated from your family.
I don't know what impact that has had on me, but I know for certain it will have affected me.
Yeah.
It certainly affected me later, because when I had certain things done to me because of this corrupt chief inspector in the police, which ruined my career, I got to a point then where I had to hold back because I wanted to punch him.
Okay. And you think that might be related to like your frustrations and your irritability?
Yeah. Well, I was diagnosed then with post-traumatic stress disorder because of what they did. Not because I was an undercover officer, but because of what they did to me. And I ended up going to King's College Hospital in London to see Professor Good Johnson. I don't know if you know.
I've heard
Mr. Good Johnson.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's renowned, and I had to go and see him.
Okay, I'm definitely going to circle back to that, if that's all right, Garry, about what the cops officers did to you. But before then, I've just got so many questions about everything we've talked about. So in terms of you've already touched on this a little bit, but in terms of your lifestyle when you're undercover, so you're separated from your family for weeks at a time, your kids presumably don't know what you're doing, but your wife presumably knows a little bit, even if she doesn't know the details.
Knows a little bit, but not everything, because you try and keep it to yourself. You don't want things being spoke about which get to the wrong ears.
Yeah.
And also you don't want your family, your wife, to know the sort of jobs you're on, because they wouldn't want you to go to work.
Of course. Absolutely.
So you cushion it, or I did. I tried to cushion it from a knowing. But that then gives you other problems, because when I then go to work and she doesn't hear from me, she's thinking, where is he?
Yeah.
And all sorts of things spring to mind then,
of course,
which aren't true. It's just that I'm actually involved in this job.
And then do you get to tell her afterwards?
That's why a lot of marriages break up.
Yeah. Do you get to tell her afterwards what's going on?
She's obviously, she knows, because I brought the book out.
Yeah.
Stuff, everything's in there. But it's very hard. It's you live in a double life. And your own personal life takes a backseat. Yeah. Because if you're a normal police officer, I say normal, you'll go to work, whether you're in the CID or you're in uniform. If you're in uniform, you take that uniform off when you go home. That's you. Yeah. You're yourself again. So you go on duty again. But as an undercover officer, like I say, the way I looked, I'm portraying that 24/7. Yeah. And I don't want anybody to know I'm a police officer. So. Like such as at my kids' school, I didn't want them to know I was a police officer. So I was happy for them to think I was a villain.
And just to put some sort of time scale on into my mind and into the minds of the viewers, would you be going like doing these projects back to back, or do you get a bit of a break in between?
That's the other thing which they were criticised later with for me, because I was doing one job, finishing, creating a new legend, which is a false identity. Yeah. Moving on to another one.
Okay.
But and some of them were quite close to home.
Yeah. Okay.
And slowly but surely that net starts to draw in, because it's a small world, as I've already said.
I have to ask, and I kind of asked what the long-term psychiatric effects were, and you said very reasonably that it's really hard for you to know at this point, because I imagine it's very sort of subtle and insidious. But my question is, what about immediately after a job? Did you? I mean, I imagine it must have been really difficult to just switch back to normal. Like, did you still carry some of the personality traits or some of the anger?
If you were to speak to my wife and ask her that question, she would say, I did.
Yeah.
Now, whether I already had those character traits from where I was brought up in Salford, and they were in there anyway, which I would argue is why I had particular success at what I did. Because, I'm big into NVCs, if you know what I'm talking about.
No,
non-verbal communications.
Okay.
And as police officers, like any other job, those individuals have characteristics that stand out. So villains would spot a police officer a mile off by the way they walk, by the way they talk. And police officers would say they could spot a villain a mile off.
Yeah.
You know, so you can imagine if you are a police officer being de-policed to get rid of those things, characteristics that make you stand out as a police officer.
Yeah.
Because that very first meeting you have with those targets is when they're going to decide if they're going to carry on with you or not.
Yeah. You have to be.
If you've got a little bit in you already.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I did things as a kid which could have got me going down a different road and not joining the police.
Yeah.
You know, I could drive when I was 15. I was driving illegally on the road.
Yeah, you were shoplifting as well.
I went shoplifting. I did all those things, you know, and I knocked about with people who went on to be villains.
Yeah.
So, you know, I had that sort of thing perhaps in me, and perhaps that could have made me, though, a better police officer.
Yeah. Well, let's not beat around the bushes. You have to be pretty fucking hard to be an undercover officer, don't you? Because there's always a threat of violence.
I think when I look back on it now, I just think I didn't give it a second thought, really. It was just something I got a buzz from and something I enjoyed doing. Yeah. Now, you know, it's horses for courses. Out of the force at that time of 7,500, I was one of 6 undercover officers in the force.
Wow.
Full time. I'm talking full time undercover officers.
Yeah.
And when I say full time, you don't go as an undercover officer in that unit on any police courses. You can't go to any police social functions.
Yeah.
You get taken out of the force. Yeah. And you're not allowed to do anything like that because, you know, and this is where I fell out with the chief inspector who was corrupt. He wanted me to go drinking with the office. And I said, I'm not going because if they're having a social function somewhere and you're in there, and I stood out at 17 stone with a bald head and earrings. There could be villains sat on the other side of that pub who know who the police officers are I'm stood with.
Yeah.
And next week they're asking me to go and try and infiltrate them. So, and they're going to remember you. Yeah. So that's why that rule is in place and why, you know, he shouldn't have broke it as he did.
And again, I'm definitely going to come back onto that, but I just want to ask a few more questions about the undercover stuff. What was I going to ask? So you mentioned before that during the football hooligan experiences, it was fairly easy to infiltrate. There's not that much risk of getting caught because of the situation. There's so many.
Well, I say that. I mean, I'm not saying it's not. It has its problems.
Yeah.
But because it's a massive group,
it's easier to blend in.
You know, it's not on a one-to-one basis like it would be with in a criminal setup.
So my question was going to be, like, have there been situations outside of the football stuff, so more of the criminal infiltration, where you've had hairy moments, or you've had moments where you think somebody's a bit suspicious, or you've been asked something that you can't answer?
I did a job in 𝐿𝐴𝐳𝐵, and it was a guy who had a cafe, and he was selling heroin and ecstasy. Now I got introduced to him, and after a period of time, we got very friendly. And I put an order in for heroin and ecstasy. And on this particular day, everything had been going really, really well. And his cafe was opposite 𝐴𝐵 police station. So I went on this morning when I'm going to be buying the gear, basically, and they would have been getting arrested. On that morning, technical officers from the Amiga unit went to 𝐴𝐵 police station, which is opposite the cafe, and had to drill a hole through the property store wall, which was right opposite the cafe, so that they could put a covert camera in to film me later on when I got there.
Okay.
So that would have been done on a need to know basis, you know, at the police station. So they went in the morning, set it all up. I then arrive. So I pull up outside and I go in to the cafe, and he's there and he's dead relaxed, and we're having a chat. And he says, "I've just put the call in. The gear will be coming round shortly.
Yeah.
Do you want a drink?" So I had a brew. We sat at the table. Then his phone went, and he went off and came back with a different look on his face.
Wow.
And he said to me, "I've just had a phone call." He said, "And someone's telling me that there's a camera over the road filming us." So I know that's true.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at him, and I expected him to say to me, "And I know who you are."
Yeah.
Now that phone call was made from 𝐴𝐵 police station, so it was a corrupt police officer.
Wow.
Who obviously didn't sufficiently know the full story and know that I was a policeman. Yeah. All he or she must have been aware of was that some technical people had been in from Great Manchester Police and they've set up this camera in the wall filming him. So I went off on one because I realised then he didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
And I had to make it look as best I could. But that's a hairy moment. Of course. Because I'm in there on my own with him. And had he have known I was a police officer, you don't know what would have happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, the phone call was found later to have been made from *𝐏𝐬𝐲𝐜𝐡 Police Station. And at that time, there was a corrupt chief inspector called Elmore Davis, who was into a lot of the drugs gangs there, getting backhanders. He eventually got arrested and sent to prison. Okay. It always made me wonder if it was someone from his team at that police station who made the call that day.
So they didn't find out exactly who it was then?
No, they never found out who it was. Okay. But it was, it's a hair-raising moment, that, because a lot of work's gone into that job up to that point. Yeah. And then to go on the day of and what happened was, he said, they're always looking at me, the police, don't worry about it. When I kicked off. Yeah. Because I said to him, you're trying to set me up. Yeah. And he said, don't worry about it, they're always watching me. He said, go off for half an hour and I'll ring you and we'll make set up a deal somewhere else. And that's what happened. I went to the Rocket at the end of the M62 in Liverpool, and they came there with the gear, and we all got arrested. And I ended up at the police station again with them. And
did they get arrested because you managed to feed back intel of where you were going?
Well, they knew. As soon as I got the new location, the police arrest team set up there covertly. Yeah. And then they brought the gear to the Rocket, and we all got arrested with the gear.
So how did they know? How did the police find out who fed that?
Because I come away and made a phone call.
Oh, it was you.
To my office. Right. Because obviously, I'm saying it's all gone pear-shaped here because he's found out about the camera opposite. But he's not worried. He doesn't want to stop the deal going off. He wants to carry on with it. Yeah. So it obviously cemented the fact that he was happy with me.
Okay. Wow. So that could have gone so much more differently, couldn't it?
It could have gone totally different.
And it's a bit of a weird question, but I was wondering this when you're talking about that story. When you kind of make friends with these villains, so that man, for example, how much of it is you just faking it, or how much of it is you actually quite liking the guy? Like, he might be a piece of shit and he's going to be arrested, but you can still like people that do bad things.
I'm sure you'll be aware of the Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and obviously some police officers can get accused of certainly undercover officers that they suffer from Stockholm syndrome, and that's where you lose fact of who you are. Yeah, and you see those villains as good people. You want to be one. And what I would say to you is, had I have been the person some of these people thought I was, i.e. a villain, they would have been better friends to me than some of the police officers I've thought as friends. Okay. Had I have been a real villain and in that situation, I'd have been glad to have those people as my mates. Yeah. Wow. And that might sound a bit daft, but at the end of the day, all villains are human beings. Yeah. They're doing what they're doing to survive, some of them, but obviously they're making a lot of money. Yeah. But as human beings, as individuals, they're decent people. You can have a laugh with them and things, and they're all right.
So I imagine you'd have to just really be very clear in your head what you're doing, and
there's the old saying, isn't there? Don't lose sight of the squirrel. And as an undercover officer, you can't take your eye off the ball.
I've got to admit, I've never heard that saying before.
I've never heard that. No. It's not one I've just made up now.
It kind of sounds made up, but I believe you. So Garry, you've mentioned this corrupt police officer a few times. H, I think you called him. As much as you're comfortable saying, do you mind telling us a bit about what was going on with that?
Yeah, no. Again, I'll just change that. H was the good guy. Now, he was an undercover officer who went up through the ranks, and when he became detective inspector, he was made head of the 𝐜𝐴𝐲𝐸 unit because he was so experienced as an undercover officer. He was given the task of obviously setting up 𝐜𝐴𝐲𝐸 to infiltrate the football hooligan problem. Yeah. He was in that unit for halfway through my undercover career, and then he retired. I went to the security services, and then we had a new guy take over, a fellow called 𝐾𝐨𝐮𝐲𝐸𝐻. Okay. I'll say that again, 𝐾𝐨𝐮𝐲𝐸𝐻. Okay. And he was a chief inspector who'd never been an undercover officer. And from the moment we met, I didn't like him and I didn't trust him. Okay. And later down the line, I realised why. But from the moment he took over, he made it quite clear, and he said this, that I don't want any H clones in this office. I'm not saying H's name for obvious reasons.
Okay.
But he was saying he didn't want anybody like him in the office. Now, I was over the moon to be a H clone because of what I'd learned from the guy, and I had respect for him for what he'd done. I had no respect for this fella. Now, one of the things we used to do, as I've already explained to you, is as an undercover officer, you would have a car for the use of, and it would be registered to you in your false name. You'd have addresses you could use as a covert property. So he came in one day, this 𝐾𝐨𝐻𝐿, and says to the office, everybody hand the keys in for this particular flat because the regional crime squad want to use it. So everybody does, apart from one guy who was away on leave. And when he comes back, he goes straight to the flat on the Monday morning, not knowing what's been said. And he's trying to get in, and the door's locked on the inside. So he starts knocking on the door. And in a short while, the door's opened, and there's a fella stood there in his underpants. And it's this 𝐾𝐿𝐻𝐿's brother, the chief inspector's brother, who's nothing to do with the police, living in the flat with his wife, rent-free. He's housed his brother and sister-in-law in a police property, which is purely for the use of undercover officers.
Okay, that's very bizarre, isn't it?
Oh, that was just one thing he did. We used to buy the cars from the undercover cars from the auctions, so they couldn't be traced back to the police. When he took over, he started buying them from a car dealer friend of his in Oldham.
Okay.
Which raises a lot of concerns for me because you don't know who that guy is, not been vetted.
Yeah.
And if he goes off telling everybody I'm supplying these cars now for the undercover unit, you don't know who he's talking to.
Yeah.
So it compromises undercover officers on jobs. But this is how he was, and he was ruining the whole ethos of that department.
Yeah, yeah.
And the rules were getting thrown down the toilet.
And also, it's quite delicate, isn't it? You have to do things right because otherwise you're putting yourself in danger.
They're done for a particular reason, and the main reason is to protect the undercover officers. You know, it's bad enough doing the job what you're doing. You don't want these problems enhancing it. So
did any of Ken's actions put you directly in danger? Any of your current colleagues? I know they potentially could have, but did it actually happen?
Yeah, potentially. All those things I've already mentioned, and there was others which could potentially put not just me, but any undercover officer on a job in danger because you didn't know what he was doing. You know, installing his brother in a police property, which is for the use of an undercover officer. Had nobody have found out about that, his brother would have come out of there at some point. But there was villains in that block, and you don't know because his brother was a fireman. Yeah. So when he was going to work, if he was in half blues, they could have associated him as a police at that flat.
Yeah, yeah.
So that could compromise that any job in the future. But there was all sorts of things he was doing, and he hated me now because I wasn't going with the way he wanted me to go. Yeah. You know, and acquiesce with the changes he was making. Yeah. So I was digging my heels in, but he couldn't get rid of me on my history as a police officer because I'd only had success. Yeah. So he then started to do underhanded things to get me out.
And did he get his comeuppance, this guy?
Down the line, he was moved overnight from the 𝐘𝐨𝐲𝐝 unit at one point because an anonymous letter went to the force about him. So bear in mind, if I'd have done the things he'd have done, I'd have got sacked. Okay. So he's moved overnight from that department. And a short time later, they send him to Australia as an ambassador for the force on an anti-corruption inquiry. And he gets sent back from there under a cloud. He gets arrested in the UK, and then he's charged with 20-odd offences of dishonesty. Yeah. And convicted. Okay.
So he sounds like a wrong one.
Now, yeah, but you know, that's him. But he then had senior officers above him protecting him. And the thing that was brought to my attention down the line by a chief constable and by the head of the internal disciplinary in Great Manchester Police further down the line was that it was a Masonic conspiracy against.
I thought you were going to say that. Because I remember hearing.
So you know, it's not me. It's not me making that statement up. Yeah, that's been said to me by two senior officers, one being a chief constable in Great Manchester Police. That they couldn't conclude anything else apart from that it was a Masonic conspiracy against me. Yeah. Yeah.
I heard bits and pieces of that in your interview with Sean Atwood, so I thought that's what you were going to say. Yeah. And Garry,
you know what? It's things like that which cause my PTSD.
Okay. And what kind of
What they
symptoms
did.
would you get with your PTSD? Are we talking about like flashbacks and
Yeah,
nightmares?
well, I cut myself off from everybody, and still do now to some extent.
Yeah.
But even more so then. So I cut myself off from my family, my friends, and I could quite easily and happily just sit in a room on my own.
Wow.
You know, I took my son for his driving test. Big day. You know, he was 17. I took him for his driving test. We arrived at the driving test centre about 10 minutes early, and I'm parked in a bay waiting for 10 minutes to expire so that we can go into the office.
Yeah.
And a car comes in with an examiner in it. He's just been out on the test, and he has a go at me for parking in this wrong bay.
Yeah.
Now, this is a symptom of what happened to me. I would see red at the drop of a hat. You know, I could just lose my temper at the drop of a hat, and I did with him. And I think he thought, God, he's a lunatic, this fella. So I say what I want to say to him and what I might do to him, and then we go in the office for my son's driving test appointment. And we're sat waiting, and about 10 minutes later, the door opens and they shout my son's name.
And
who is it? It's this guy I've just bollocked outside.
Oh, no.
And so, can you imagine how I felt?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I thought I've ruined it for him.
And did your son pass?
He passed.
Okay,
So
I reckon the guy
I
was probably
can
shit
only-
scared of you, wasn't he?
Oh, I can only say, you know, respect for the guy, his professionalism didn't let him think, you know, what I did will have any effect on his judgment of my son.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that was me, just and he wouldn't know what was wrong with me.
Yeah.
But you know, that's how I was. I'd lose my temper really quick. Or another thing was, I'd get up in the night, and my wife would shout me, and I'd be trying to get in the wardrobe. I think it was a door. You know, I was trying to get out.
Yeah.
And then she'd shout me, and I'd wake up.
Well.
So it shows you how it was on my mind all the time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's indicative of something, isn't it? If you're trying to escape.
Yeah.
Listen, Garry, I could talk to you all day, but we're running out of time. So before we
Right.
finish, can you please tell us a bit about your book and what you've got going on? Any other projects, social media?
Well, obviously, I'm not on social media.
Okay.
My main thrust for getting this book published was just to get the story out.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have done it had I just done the undercover side. I'd have just gone away and disappeared. But it still grieves me today to think that those individuals who did what they did to me are still out there now on the fat pensions.
Yeah.
And have got away with it to some extent. So I pushed and got this book published. So I'm not on any social media, but the book, which is Undercover Policing and the Corrupt Secret Society Within, which is all about the Masonic influence within the police and how that affected me. Obviously available at Amazon, all the other books sellers.
And do you go through some of the things we were
main
talking
thing.
about today? You talk about some of your stories and all your undercover experience.
Oh, yeah, the full stories in there from my childhood up to what happened to me at the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that sounds fascinating. I've not read it, but I think after this conversation, you've convinced me. I'm definitely going to go get a copy.
There's plenty more stories, believe me.
Okay, maybe we'll have you on again as a guest in the future. It'll be an honour to speak to you again.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Garry, you're a really interesting, intelligent man. But your backstory's fascinating. Remind me to never get on the wrong side of you. And thank you so much for being a guest on Psychics All Minds.
And as they say, thanks for having me.
I wish you all the best, sir.
All right, bye.